On the run. When you know you have to do something but don't want to do it, there's a very real tendency to want to run away. Have you experienced that? Experience tells us that you can run, but you can't hide. When it comes to doing the right thing, there really isn't any place you can go where it won't catch up with you. The Bible tells us about a man named Jonah that God called to go and confront wickedness. In Jonah chapter 1, verse 2, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. Jonah didn't want to go. He was afraid. He was afraid God's message would make him unpopular. God's word stirs things up in people, and it stirs things up in a person. People say that the world has gotten a lot smaller. We're very much a product of the wider world around us. Today, God will call us to go and confront wickedness in our own selves. There are parts of each of us that are a lot like a foreign city, where we don't want to go because it's too rough. Or we kind of like that place inside us, rough and available with all its temptations when we want to sneak there. We really don't want to change, so we run from change. Jonah decided to go on the run from his problems. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. And you find that in Jonah chapter 1, verse 3. This is sometimes called taking a geographical cure among addicts. People leave town and supposedly their troubles rather than go into recovery. Like Jonah, they figure a change of scenery will put everything behind them and solve their problems. How did that work for Jonah? Well, not very well. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. We find that in chapter 1, verse 4. Problems have a way of following you. You need to do what you have to do, and it doesn't go away. And where do we find Jonah in the midst of all that storm? Well, he's taking a nap, like any person would in full avoidance mode. But Jonah had gone down below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. That's in verse 5 of chapter 1. Denial is easy in dream time, and when all else fails, try escaping from your problems by going to sleep. Not only do your problems catch up to you when you're on the run from them, they catch up to those around you. Poor Jonah's shipmates had to deal with Jonah and the fallout from Jonah's problem. When things got too much, they had to confront Jonah. What have you done? They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." And that you'll find that in Jonah chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. Is this familiar? If you won't deal with your problems, those around you are forced into having to deal with you and your problems. Telling other people to be tough on you when you won't be tough on yourself is really very passive. Running from our troubles lays a load of guilt on those around us because they have to deal with the mess. Jonah's shipmates tried to avoid tossing Jonah into the sea. As verse 13 tells us, instead the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. How often do those who love us try to avoid the inevitable and the guilt that goes with it? In verse 15 we read, "Finally, then they took Jonah, threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm." Being on the run always takes you to a worse place than from where you started from. Like all false solutions, you end up with greater problems and fewer options. From his end, God is patient and provides when everything crashes like he did for Jonah. In verse 17, we read, "Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights." For some of my friends, the belly of the fish is jail. For others, the belly of the fish is repeating a destructive cycle. The belly of the fish can be a place of realization and acceptance of what has to be done. This process is called surrender or submission. These are not terms we especially like in our selfish and vain world. In the next podcast, we'll go and look at what Jonah did with his time in the belly of the fish. Did Jonah confront what he had to do? Was he willing to change? We'll see. For now, why don't you read ahead and see?